Hi, I'm Madison Miner back here with POK's Say What podcast. Today I have a guest. Her name is Tiffany Craft, and she is joining us as a parent advocate from Irvine here in Orange County. Tiffany, welcome to our podcast.
Hi, good morning, Madison. Thank you so much for having me on. I truly appreciate this opportunity. It's great to be with you here today.
Absolutely. I'm so thankful that you were able to make it. So I have so many questions for you. I've loved all of the work that you have done as an advocate here in Orange County as a parents' rights advocate. So what made you first get involved in the school system in public education surrounding your own child?
Yes, great question. And thank you for the question. Thank you for the compliments. I truly appreciate it. I do consider myself a parent advocate at this point, but it took me a while. This has not always been my calling, I'll admit. So just a little bit on my background that kind of leads you into why I'm doing what I'm doing, what specifically called me to do it. So I'm married, been married for 19 years to a wonderful husband who's actually an internal medicine doctor with Kaiser. And that's important because he is able to support me being a full-time mom and advocate with one income. Initially, when we were first married and before we started family planning, I planned to be a working parent. So we were blessed with a daughter who is now 11 years old and in 5th grade. And for the first year and a half, I was a working mom trying to balance work, a very stressful job in the corporate world, with being a mom. And it was very difficult. And then I had some health issues. And my daughter also had some health issues and complications. So we knew that I was going to need to take a leave of absence for her to have a surgery. And at that point, my health wasn't great either. So my husband and I evaluated it and we said, hey, can we make this work on one income? And then you can be full-time mom and be involved, invest all your time in raising our daughter. And of course, he's very involved too, but the daytime responsibilities would fall to me. So we did the numbers and we decided, you know what, we're going to do this. This is a leap of faith. Living in Irvine is not cheap, even though he's a physician. He's not a multi-million-dollar physician by any means. He's a modest Kaiser doc, but he makes enough for us to be able to live comfortably in Irvine and for me to be able to be super involved in my daughter's life. And so I just felt so blessed to have that opportunity. So education has always been a passion of mine and a big deal. And I was fortunate to have parents that were truly engaged and invested in it and grandparents. And so I knew I wanted to be involved in my daughter's schooling. And early on, I honestly had thought about homeschooling. I knew a little bit about what was going on with the public school system when she was young, but I didn't know as much as I know now. But homeschooling didn't feel like the right model for us at that time. And so we knew Irvine Unified. We actually sought out Irvine Unified before we had my daughter because we were looking for a community that was safe, great for families, and had excellent schools. The idea being she would go to the local public schools. So that was our vision initially. So homeschooling really wasn't on our radar largely because of that, because it didn't seem like a fit. And because Irvine Unified had such a great reputation as a school district. So we actually started in that school district when she was young. We started at 2 years old. They had this drop-in social experience you could do that was through the school district.
Kind of like a Mommy and Me?
Exactly. Yeah. So organized socializing play dates type thing. And then we stuck with that program all the way till she was 3. And then she did preschool through the Early Childhood Learning Center in IUSD and had a very positive experience. We were plugged in with the district at that point, starting to receive all the communications because we were in the Early Childhood Center. And actually, they are the ones who helped us recognize she had some hearing loss, my daughter, because they did the screenings. And so I'm grateful for that because we were able to get tubes put in her ears and that fixed that problem. So I saw a lot of good going there for the early childhood learning portion. But at the same time, my mom was saying, wait a second, there's some little red flags here that I'm seeing, like hyper focus on race, hyper focus on gender. Even at this young age, they had changed some of the terminology. They were shifting away from boys and girls, to more neutral terminology. And then they would read books about skin color and so forth. So I started to become clued in a little bit at that point. But I honestly didn't think too much of it. And then And we wound up attending kinder at our neighborhood school. And I had said, I want to be involved. You know, it's my passion to be able to give back, to help in the classroom. Well, so right away when you start at these Irvine Unified schools, the PTA has a very strong presence. So they try to rope you in early on. And while my daughter was there in kinder was only a half-day program for her. So I didn't really have time extra to invest because after those 3 hours, it goes by fast. It's mommy and me time and going to various activities. So I couldn't commit to a lot when she was in kinder, but I would go for the class parties, whatever the teacher needed. And that was such a blessing. And then COVID hit in the middle of her kinder year. And that really changed everything. And that was my big wake up call that really ignited my passion to be involved beyond just being a parent volunteer, to start doing my own research, my own homework, to see how I could be a better advocate for our kids. Because I saw a lot through the pandemic response policies that caused a great deal of harm, learning loss, mental health challenges for our children. My daughter herself suffered quite tremendously with the mandates. Wasn't easy for her to have a mask on. And when the schools did open back up and we returned, that's really where I would say my advocacy kicked into high gear, because she's playful, active. She doesn't want her face covered up all day. And we happened to have an unfortunate experience with a teacher in second grade, when her second grade year at Irvine Unified, that was very no nonsense about the mask. It has to stay up, has to stay above the nose. And that was a traumatizing experience. So by that time, I had become involved in the PTA at the school. And I had been asked by the principal if I would consider joining school site council. And I honestly, at the time, didn't really even know what it was. All I know is I saw it in like the email bulletins that they were asking for volunteers, and I was kind of concerned it was going to be a huge commitment. Didn't know if I could swing it, but she kept following up with me. And so I finally decided, yeah, this actually sounds really good. So I signed on to be on school site council when my daughter was in second grade, and I did it through the first half of third grade. And during this period, there was still recovery from all the pandemic learning loss and pandemic policies, and things were starting to get back to normal. But there was a paradigm shift as to the ideology that was being promoted in the district that I noticed. So around the same time I joined school site council, I had started tuning into the IUSD board meetings. And for a long time, they were virtual only because of COVID. But as soon as they went back to in person, I started going in person. And I heard about this continuous improvement committee that had been in place for quite a while. It used to be called the Curriculum Committee, and it was the Assistant Superintendent of Education Services that was reporting out on what this was her baby. She was reporting out on what this committee was doing, and it was there that I found out all this social justice had made its way into our school district, and it was her wheelhouse. This is what she did. And she was pretty bold about saying, we are shifting to an explicit focus on social justice. And she made it very clear that the catalyst for that was the Black Lives Matters, the George Floyd protest. She used that as an excuse to usher in an explicit focus on social justice. And so I actually, after that, having been on the school site council, I raised my hand to ask if I could be on that committee because she had mentioned it was a bunch of stakeholders that included parents, administrators, teachers, community members, taxpayers. So after a couple of weeks, they agreed to let me on it, but that's where I really got my wake-up call. So that was a very long-winded answer, but my desire to be involved and be an advocate is motivated by my daughter and motivated by our children who are our future generation.
Absolutely. So you mentioned school site council, and I am familiar with them, but just for our listeners, can you kind of talk about a general idea of what school site councils have to do with schools and what that entails?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. A lot of people who have some awareness of school site council have the misconception that it's perhaps a powerless entity or a rubber stamping body. And it may be. It really honestly depends on who's on the council and the school district, because there can be different ways of administering it. But truth be told, this is an entity that does actually have a lot of power and a lot of authority if the responsibility is taken seriously. So school site council is something that has to be established for schools that accept Title I funds. The California Department of Education has very prescribed requirements for what role the school site council is supposed to play. And it is, in essence, a governing body. It's different from the school board or the Board of Education in that this is a local level council focused on a local school site. And the primary responsibilities are to oversee the school safety plan, to oversee that the school climate and environment within the climate is healthy and that students are achieving at optimal levels, and to be able to identify and discern what roadblocks or barriers are preventing students from achieving at their highest levels. And then the other very important element of it is to make sure that there's partnership between the community, the parents, that there is community feedback that is taken into consideration, that we have strong influence over the LCAP. And for families who don't, or parents who don't know what the LCAP is, that is basically the Bible document for a public school, where the school has to list every single goal it wishes to attain, and some are prescribed by the state because you have to have goals surrounding academic achievement, attendance, suspension rates. All of that's monitored through the dashboard on the California Department of Education website. But on top of that, then the local school site council can come up with additional goals relative to school climate, parent involvement, parent engagement, staff support. So we are not a rubber stamping entity. And in fact, I encourage parents to get involved in this capacity, because oftentimes schools are desperate in searching for parents who want to raise their hand and volunteer for this opportunity. So it's a wonderful way for you to be an advocate for your own child, but also for all of our children.
Absolutely. So your daughter is now in third grade.
Fifth grade, actually.
Well, no, I mean at the time.
At the time, yes.
Yeah, so
yes.
she's in third grade.
Yes.
You're involved now, not just at your school level, but at a district level with school site council or a committee of that
Correct.
sort.
Yes.
So what happened next? What transpired after you joined and kind of got your eyes opened even more at the Irvine Unified School District level?
Right. So it was very interesting how things evolved with both school site council and the continuous improvement committee, which was at a district level. So with regard to school site council, what we discovered between the second grade and third grade years that my daughter was in, the school size, well, the school she went to was 1,200 students, believe it or not, which is very large. And not all 1,200 had returned to campus still by this point, but it was building back up to that. But what they were seeing is that there was substantial learning loss, far beyond what they could have ever imagined. And that was the big challenge that we were grappling with as school site council members, is how do we get our hands around this and fix this? Because here we are, we have children that stayed on course during the pandemic policies and are way far ahead. So we have those students and we have to keep them challenged and meet the needs of those students. And then we have those students who can't even read and write, period. And they're in third grade or second grade.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it was that drastic. And mind you, they don't start state testing until third grade. So it is kind of hard to gauge exactly how far behind those students are that are coming in and can't read and write. But you know it's going to be a ripple effect if you're not addressing it. So you could potentially have students coming into third grade taking the standardized tests that don't know how to do basic math, that can barely read a sentence, that can barely write a sentence or two, or not even. And on top of that, during this period, we had a lot of immigrants from other countries, non-native English speakers that had joined our district and our local school in particular. So there was a language barrier. So we had all sorts of challenges surrounding that. So that was one of the things that School Site Council was tasked with, is coming up with some creative solutions to address that and address learning barriers. And then the other thing was this survey, the school climate survey, had shown that parents felt that they were being pushed away and that staff were not feeling supported. And it seemed like morale was way down. And when we probed into that, because that was not the climate of the school before the pandemic. And so it really did seem like a lot of that was due to pandemic policies, social distancing especially, really. And then people were slow to warm back up to, we don't have to social distance anymore. So it was, how do we mend all that, like the fractured nature of how we socialize? So that was something School Site Council had to take on. And then in the midst of all this, you had the Uvalde shooting. So there were campus safety concerns. And in our case, all of the IUSD campuses are open campuses.
They're very open. I've been to them.
So there was much discussion about how we keep our children safe. So those were the things we were grappling with at the local level. And then meanwhile, at the district level, the pendulum swung away from race, hyper focus on explicit focus on social justice, towards now this gender orientation or gender identity, sexual orientation form of social justice, where they were promoting the rights of, they always refer in their semantics to them as marginalized groups, right? With the premise, they were approaching it through the lens of they're discriminated against. These students are discriminated against. So we need special policies for these groups of students. We need high levels of awareness, hyper focus on inclusivity, encouraged to report hate speech. Just so much hyper focus on all this was being pushed down from the district level, to the extent that teachers were being asked to write specific goals surrounding how they would bring more awareness to these marginalized groups of students. Yeah. So, and it didn't seem like they were willing to turn back, because this was coming down through the continuous improvement committee that I was serving on. And, I should rephrase, Continuous Improvement Council. I have to be careful there. It's a council. There are other committees, but it's important that I distinguish, because a council doesn't have the same requirements for posting minutes, opening it to public forum, that sort of thing, whereas a committee does. Right. So in a way, it felt like a lot of this was being done behind closed doors, sort of secretively, and the district was saying, oh no, we've got all these diverse stakeholders who are on board with this and want this. But in actuality, I had come to the conclusion these were hand-picked folks that would not resist or protest the agenda that was being put forth. I was very often the lone dissenting voice in these conversations, but it was an eye-opening experience, and I really got to see where the sausage is made and how this stuff gets pushed down through in our school. And the big focus was getting it all the way down to the pre-K level.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so at what point did you decide to take your daughter out of the typical public school system?
Great question. So I really wrestled with this. It was a difficult decision because we loved the convenience of being able to walk to school. We loved our community. We'd made a lot of friends. By this time, I was also heavily involved in PTA in a board capacity. So I enjoyed being on campus, being present, getting to know all the families. But I also had such high hope that through my involvement in these levels that I could help the pendulum shift back the other way.
Right.
And I had some very candid conversations with the principal at my daughter's school, who was great. And for the most part, we were very like-minded, and she was so supportive of the work I was doing. Although she's like, don't boast about that in public, right? But she would tell me that in confidence. And I liked her. We had a really good relationship, and I thought she was great for the school, but she wasn't strong enough to stand up and say she was going to push back against this agenda. Right. I basically got the impression that this is coming. We don't like it either, but they always throw in there, oh, you're going to be at risk of losing all your funding, right? Or you'll get penalized. They scare all these administrators into believing that. Therefore, there are very few, if any, in IUSD that are willing to take a strong stand and say, this is bonkers, this is ludicrous. So,
and principals are not protected by the teachers union.
True.
True. Yeah, like your teachers are.
Exactly. So it was after conversations with her, and then after seeing that, a year plus into this explicit focus on social justice, and state testing is just now resuming again. It was on hiatus for a while during COVID. We noticed that, this hyper-focus on marginalized student groups doesn't really seem to be helping their achievement levels. In fact, the trajectory is going the opposite direction. So I thought, I've done all this work here. Nobody's listening. I'm beating the drum. A lot of parents feel the same way, but they're not wanting to take it any further, right? They're just honing in on their child and what it is they can do to protect their child. So I recognize that this was not the best environment for my daughter to be able to achieve in any longer. So at that point, middle of third grade, we were exploring homeschool again. I decided to revisit that. Private school and charter school. And I just happened to find out that there was a charter school less than 2 miles from our house, not walking distance, but very close driving distance. That was a Mandarin immersion school. And my daughter had been asking to learn another language, and I wouldn't have thought Chinese would be the language we would choose, because I cannot help her. I don't have any background in it. I speak Spanish, so I was figuring we would get her on that track. But I knew about this charter school because I'd been following the IUSD board meetings, and it had gone through a very up and down first year. And so I had kind of written it off, but I didn't realize at the time that the board, the county board, and the charter school board had replaced the leadership there and had mended all of what had gone bad in the first year. And so I was invited. I saw their booth at an Irvine tree lighting ceremony right before Christmas, and they were so welcoming and friendly, and they invited me for a tour, and I have to admit I was skeptical, and I was honest and forthright with them because their brochure said something about a progressive environment, and I thought, I don't know about that. My husband said, you better check into this, right, before you seriously go on the tour. And so I asked them when they called to schedule the tour, I said, what exactly do you mean by progressive? It was not at all what we're thinking of in terms of political ideology or viewpoint. It was progressive from the standpoint of we immerse them in the environment and they make progress, like progressive in terms of like making tangible progress with each year they spend at the school. And then they told me that we have new leadership, that Dr. Stefan Bean is our executive director. And I thought, enough said. I'll come for a tour. And my daughter really was not happy in her current class at school and with the social situation. She was ostracized quite a bit because she was not afraid to express herself and say that she was not on board with mask mandates and other things, right? And not on board with grouping people by race or skin color. She's just an innocent young child, and her mind is just precious, right? So she says what's on her mind. So she toured the school with me, and I wasn't expecting to start her there in the middle of the school year. I was figuring we'd wait it out and start the following school year. She said, Mom, I'm ready to start today. She saw the classroom, spent time in the classroom, and they said, no, why don't you come back, the next day and let her actually stay for the day in the classroom so she makes sure she likes it. And there's no looking back. She said, Mom, I'm ready to start. Ready to start right now. So we actually started at the Mandarin Immersion Charter School, Irvine International Academy in the January of 2023.
That's incredible to make that kind of a change, and for her to initiate it is just fantastic.
And I'm so blessed that it was her idea. And she settled in really well, and we discovered she has a gift for learning a language. So it's been a true blessing for her and for our family.
So you leave the typical public school system, and I'm sure you're still acquainted with, friends with individuals that have stayed. How do those conversations go, and do they understand why you left, and do they also share the same concerns, or is that something that they maybe aren't even worried about or aware of?
It's mixed, honestly. There are those whose eyes are not open to all that's going on, And then there are those who are very much aware of it and they accept it, but they are of the mindset that we'll do whatever we can for our child. We'll educate them at home. We know that when we send them off to school, they're going to be subject to these influences. All we can hope for is by grounding them in reality at home and teaching them morals, values, virtues at home, that will shield them from any perversion that they may encounter in the public school setting. And then those whose eyes aren't quite open to it, I would say are slower to come around, but I am seeing them come around now. I am hearing them come around now, and they're asking questions. They're wanting to know, what can I do? How do I need to get involved? So everybody has their own journey, but I think at this point, there's no denying that this is real. This is really happening. These agendas definitely exist. I mean, I was in denial about it after I was first on that continuous improvement council because I couldn't believe this was actually happening. So I understand where denial would be the first reaction of a lot of people. And then the media, there's a lot of hyperbole constantly in our face through the media and social media. So people have to discern, right? But I think they see it now, especially when they see, wait, my kid, when we think back to growing up in our days in public education, I went to public elementary, it sure seemed like there was a lot more rigor, a lot more focus on the basics, whereas today it's a lot more emphasis on social engineering stuff is the way I describe it. So people are definitely waking up to it now.
Yeah, and even just in Orange Unified, a new superintendent was just announced coming from Massachusetts.
Oh, interesting.
And if you go to her Twitter page, it's all about social justice and the BLM movement.
Oh.
And she's very vocal on her Twitter page, or I guess you should call it X. She's very vocal on X about what she supports, and it's definitely all social justice issues and the war on social emotional learning and CRT.
Yes.
And so it's it's a lot of it concerning and terrifying thinking of Orange Unified students. Now there's already a 7-0 majority when it comes to leftists on that board, and now they've brought in this superintendent who I'm almost embarrassed to say is worse than the one that we fired. And so, thankfully your kid, my kids are safe, but it devastates me for the ones that don't have options.
Exactly.
They can't homeschool. They can't afford to homeschool.
Right.
They can't send their kids to private school. Yeah. And honestly, bottom line is their tax dollars are going. Your tax dollars are going. My tax dollars are still going to the public school down the street from me.
Right.
Even though my kids don't even go there.
Right.
And so there's got to be a change. Obviously the root issue of we shouldn't be focusing on that. We should be focusing on literacy and math and science and true history. But here we are. And, there's such a need for a revival in Orange County.
There is. And I'm sorry to hear about your Orange Unified Board situation and the superintendent. I thought there was a lot of goodwill built up for a period there, and that your district was turning a corner in a very positive way. And it's unfortunate what happened with the recall and now the new superintendent. And I'm shocked. What about the community? They can't be on board with this, right? I mean, I know Orange seems to be like a pinnacle of Southern California, right? I mean, y'all were one of the preeminent school districts for a long time as well. And our parents just not clued in on the correlation between this kind of stuff and the lower levels of academic achievement that arise when it's brought in? Or
I think it's a mixture. I think it's similar to what you were saying, where some people just take a little longer to be educated and to be informed. But, we did our best to inform when I ran for school board, when I was on the school board. And it just seems like so many individuals have the mindset kind of like you were saying, where they say, well, we're going to educate our kids at home. So when they get to school and the indoctrination starts, attempting on their brains, that we've already forewarned them, we've already pre-educated. But the root issue is why are we focusing so much on these ulterior agendas when we can't even, our kids can't even read properly?
Right.
And Orange Unified is one of the lowest school districts in Orange County. I know Irvine's not the case. You guys have a very high graduation rate, very good results, but Orange Unified is sad. It's pitiful.
Right.
They celebrate a 52 percentile, test score, which I don't care as much about test scores solely. There's a whole, basis that you should be looking at for each child. But when when they're celebrating test scores going from an F- to an F+, that's not celebration. No.
Yeah.
Why are we celebrating that?
Yeah.
So I apologize for that tangent. I just felt like it's such a frustrating thing to see folks not hearing our warnings.
Right.
And then reacting after the fact. And it's not too late. We can always keep fighting and standing up. But I just wish they would have gotten on board at the time that we were on board, where we would have been able to link arms.
Absolutely true. And I will pray for all those folks too, because I think prayer does go a long way in all of this, whether you're a believer or not, doesn't matter. I'm going to pray for you.
Absolutely.
Because I think prayer is needed in this journey. And you said something interesting that I just wanted to probe further on or highlight some more for people, is that not everybody has the means to pull their children out of public school. That is so true. And what's particularly sad, my heart is all about giving. So I will give to whatever walk of life you're from. My love is unconditional, right? I love to be able to give back and to serve the community. I have a heart for helping people. So I know that there are a lot of families out there that are working 2 jobs, maybe 3 or 4 jobs, just to put food on the table for their family, so they can't be involved doing this kind of work, and they don't have the means to send their children to an alternative school or private school or homeschool. So I mean, that's what parents like myself and Madison are for, is like, let us be a resource for you. And I know that so often, again, this tends to be hyperbole a bit, where they say, pull your kids out of public school now. We need to shift away from that. Yeah, that's a fine message, but we need to remember that, like you mentioned, not everybody is in a position to do that. So let's think about what we can do for those that are left in the public school setting, how we can equip them with the tools and resources they need to truly excel academically, to be able to shut out all the nonsense that is interfering with their ability to focus on basic academics. And truth be told, let's equip the teachers with the tools and resources and the support that they need, because the vast majority of teachers don't want to be pushing this stuff or teaching it either.
They don't have the time.
Exactly. Exactly. They're so busy helping to close the achievement gap with their students. So let's let them do that. That's what they're best at.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now your daughter is in this charter school, and you mentioned Dr. Bean.
Yes.
So he's there as the superintendent. Well, I know that he's now in Orange County for the Orange County superintendent of all of our schools here.
Yes.
So how did that shift happen, and what has kind of ensued since then?
That's a great question. And I will tell you what, if I've ever witnessed a miracle, it's probably been Dr. Bean turning around this charter school, because what he came into was almost a situation beyond repair. It was a Mandarin immersion language school. All but one of the Chinese teachers quit after that first year, and we lost quite a few other teachers as well. And it's not like it's easy to find. You're dealing with visa situations, immigration, all sorts of complexities trying to get, and credentialing requirements trying to get Mandarin teachers, because ideally you want them to be credentialed in not only teaching the language, but elementary education, so they can teach all the subjects. So he is just, he's been through so much adversity himself. I think that worked really to our school's advantage, and it was a blessing that our school got him, because he knew right what to do as soon as he came in terms of recruiting talent. But the greatest thing he did, which was so desperately needed, was he unified the community. So we had a situation where a portion of the community were very bitter parents from year one, and they wound up the day before school started in 2022 unenrolling. And that was a blow to our school because funds are contingent upon attendance and enrollment numbers. Now, it wouldn't hit us hard until when we started in January because that's the funding. The funding is going to be based off of your enrollment numbers that spring. That fall, actually. So your allotment for spring is going to be less. And so the school was in a bit of a fiscal hardship. So he was taking on a lot, but he really brought the community together. He brought such high levels of integrity and transparency, and he commanded the respect of the parents, of the students. His approach to student discipline and teaching them morals, values, virtues, character. He brought in the character counts curriculum. And then he brought the staff together as well. And that was part of the challenge in year one, is that there was not cohesion. There were major barriers, language and cultural, between the English-speaking staff and the Chinese-speaking staff. But with a leader like Dr. Bean, who is truly a servant leader and a visionary leader and an instructional leader, a very proficient instructional leader, he brought all the pieces that were necessary to resuscitate this school and established just a beautiful culture and foundation of respect, mutual respect, a strong partnership with parents. He was very clear parents are welcome in. We want you right here alongside your student in this journey. Very supportive of his staff and teachers and very supportive of the PTO. So it was a very strong, wonderful environment. So we got word of his ambition to step into the county role. He was actually very transparent with families early on that his aspirations were to have to run for that office again at some point. So we knew realistically that he wouldn't be with us forever, but we were just relishing the amount of time he was with us, which wound up being 2 full school years. And he was able to grow enrollment back up beyond where it was before. He, through his leadership, our school became a highly sought after school with a pretty extensive wait list. And through him, we have the highest achievement. Really, that's, I think, the biggest feather in his cap is he knows how to elevate student achievement levels. Our levels were good when he came in. They were good for a charter school, but he took them to beyond great. To top in the state levels, because when you have the right leader that creates the right environment, the right culture, you just get in this beautiful flow and you see achievement skyrocket, even for those who are special needs or have disabilities, learning challenges. Every student was achieving and excelling in our school, and that was so beautiful to see. Now, we're all happy for him and love him in this county role. I mean, that is where he's needed most of all, because if he can do what he did with our little school at a county-wide level, imagine that. Right. That would just be amazing. And I believe he can do it. It's not going to be overnight. It's going to take quite a while, but he knows right how to do it. So it was an interesting and sort of unfortunate turn of events for our school, his departure. But he's always, he's always in touch with us and will always still be supportive of what he established there in our community. And we appreciate that. But the new leadership that was brought in, one more thing about Dr. Bean is not very many people are capable of this, but he played the role of principal and executive director. And he did it out of the goodness of his heart because he knew the school did not have the money to pay for a principal and an executive director. And in year one, that was part of the controversy, is they had a principal and an executive director and they were constantly butting heads. So he said, you know what, I'll just fill both roles for the short term. And we had reached the point spring of last year where the board recognized that we need to hire a principal now. So we had just hired a principal right as we were learning Dr. Bean was going to be appointed to the county level. And the principal hiring process was wonderful. Parents got to be part of the panel.
Wow, that's amazing.
For interviewing the candidates. So we had skin in the game. That was truly amazing. Now, for hiring the executive director, Dr. Bean's direct replacement, we did not have any say in that. That was done by the IIA board. We have our own charter board. Okay. Just for the sake of clarity, we are not under Irvine Unified School District. We are chartered through the county board, which actually has been a blessing for our school because initially IUSD was very resistant to having charters. They now actually have one that happens to be a Mandarin immersion school also, but it took them a long time to warm up to there is this need in the community. Why not offer this program? So we're blessed to have it through the county board. And the new executive director that was selected by our board, so our board is a 5-person board, totally separate and independent of Irvine Unified's board and independent of the county board of ed. They selected a candidate whom they thought would be the best fit. I'm not sure what criteria they used to evaluate candidates, but the individual they chose came in not really with the mindset I'm going to do a listening tour and get a feel for the culture and the community. No, radical mindset. The individual that has come in has a radical mindset, sought to change everything, basically undoing all the goodwill that was established. So this particular period of time has required a lot of advocacy work by myself, by other parents in the community, because we are fighting hard to preserve all the good that we had, and we're getting through to people. I mean, we're pretty united over this, but it just goes to show what a difference a leader can make, right? There's a pretty stark contrast when you have someone who is truly focused on servant leadership and student achievement relative to someone who is really good at promoting a narrative, towing the corporate line, I guess is how I would describe it. Yeah, it makes a difference.
Makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So you're here, you're maybe more involved in the classroom than you were in your prior commitments in Irvine Unified. So now you're at this Mandarin immersion school, and you mentioned a school board. Do they have an oversight committee at your school? And in what ways have you found that you needed to get involved again?
Great question. So I serve on the PTO board. I'm currently the treasurer of our PTO, and I'm in my second year doing that. And that has given me a great purview into fiscal management, not only of the PTO, but of the school's finances too, because they're closely intertwined. Because in a charter school, it's a highly specialized learning environment. So the funds you're going to receive are not truly going to be enough to cover the cost of delivering that type of specialized program. Therefore, the PTO plays a particularly important role in helping to supplement. So that's been a blessing to be involved in that capacity. And one of the things that we are now challenged with, which was not an issue under Dr. Bean's leadership, is getting parent volunteers. There was so much interest. People were always asking us, what can I do? What can I do? But now with this change of leadership, you see, this is another thing that people take for granted when you have a change of leadership like this with a totally different philosophy about learning, totally different mindset. You drive parents away. So that's been a struggle for us. And then we just got a school site council established. My understanding is there was one in year one, but because of all the controversy from within, it got disbanded. So we hadn't had one for a couple of years. And it was something that Dr. Bean wanted us to have established as well. So we got that up and running this year. And I'm blessed to be the chair of the school site council for our little school now. And it's kind of funny how that came to be. And this, again, is a testament to you've got to pay close attention to your administration and to decisions being made at the administrative and board level, because I know 4 of us expressed interest in serving on school site council, and we were ready to go. We weren't sure what the school's process was going to be for putting it together. They had alluded to there being a community vote, which, hey, we thought that was great, but we submitted our interest forms. Well, the principal stands up and tells the IIA board there were no candidates that expressed interest or no qualified candidates for this role, right? And we all wrote a little paragraph summary about why we thought this role, we would be a good fit for the role, right? And in mine, I had previously served on school site council. And so then we have a coffee with the principal. He says the same thing. Well, the 4 of us who knew we had applied raised our hand and we said, excuse me, what do you mean there's no interest? We 4 applied. So what are you telling us? And we caught them off guard. The principal and the executive director were both at that meeting, and they backpedaled and didn't really know what to say. And they said, oh, well, the forms must have gotten lost, so we're going to re-canvass for interest. And we said, okay, so does that mean that we have to fill out the form all over again? Yes, he said, but the plot thickened, so we did. And then he did say there would be a community vote. So when the slate comes out for candidates to vote on, one of the gals decided from the original 4 decided she wasn't going to put her name on it anymore. And so she didn't submit the second time. Her name was still on the ballot.
Oh, goodness.
The slate came out with her name on the ballot. So what does that tell you? Did they really lose the forms, or did they want to be able to have some sway and who would be on the slate for people to vote for? Yeah. So I was blessed to be voted in to the school site council, and the other gals that had put their form in the second time also got the votes to be on the council. And we've just had such a wonderful time working. It's a wonderful group of moms and wonderful group of teachers. And I feel like there's very strong cohesion. We're united in our vision and wanting to deliver on promises made for achievement levels and having a strong, supportive, and nurturing environment, and for parents to be part of that journey.
Well, and it's amazing to hear, I feel like we're very similar in that we didn't come into this thinking, oh, we're going to serve in these capacities, but we've gotten these little nuggets of skills and experience, and now look where you're at because of your involvement prior, even though maybe those weren't even roles that you saw yourself in.
Right.
And now you're there. So there's other moms that are going to be watching this, and dads. And so what would you say to them in encouraging them to get involved, but also when it comes to that stamina and that kind of that nonstop attitude towards trying to stay on top of things with their schools? Because like we talked about, not everyone has their kid or has the opportunity for charter school or private school or homeschool. So for those families that don't really have those options, what would be your advice to them to stay involved and to get involved?
Let me start with that first, and then I'll pivot back to moms and dads and roles and opportunities and so forth. So the best thing that I would encourage all parents out there listening to do is make sure you pay. If you can't do anything else and you don't have time or bandwidth to give any volunteer hours, that's okay. But you got to make sure you read every single communication that is sent out from your school, not just from your teacher, from your principal, from any higher level than the principal you may have at your school, and from the district. Mm-hmm. And you've got to pay close attention to the messaging. And you'll notice in a lot of the public schools, this is what I noticed in Irvine Unified, it's the same message kind of regurgitated. It's like a copy-paste script that makes its way into these communications, but there's very subtle nuances that you need to pay attention to that will clue you in to the shift away from basic academics and the favoring of this social engineering agenda. So please, please, please pay attention to those little clues and cues. It's vital that you read every sentence, every word of the communications that are being sent out. And then outside of that, I encourage folks to check out Protect Our Kids, check out resources. There are a lot of great resources available out there, but I think that Protect Our Kids has a really wonderful repository of resources for parents to be able to refer to. I would say, definitely take advantage of opportunities during pickup and drop off. If you're able to pick your children up and or drop them off, to chat with other families, to chat with the teachers or the administrators or whomever is present on site, develop those relationships, build trust amongst the staff and teachers. And, so paying attention, building relationships, and then if you can, and so this is to the other part of your question, if you can and you have the bandwidth, be realistic about what you can give. We understand it may be a sacrifice for most people to be able to give their time to volunteer, but it doesn't have to be hours and hours upon end. It could be an hour here, an hour there. It could be 30 minutes here, 15 minutes. Every bit of time you can spend on campus makes a wonderful positive difference. And if you face any resistance whatsoever in being welcomed onto campus, I encourage you to take that straight away to your school site council, to your principal, to your PTA or PTO, because that should not be the case. We really need these schools to be fostering welcoming environments for parents and family members.
Do you feel more empowered now than when you first started, back when your daughter was in kindergarten?
Interesting question. I feel like I have much more knowledge. I feel enriched with knowledge. And I feel like with knowledge, you can make much more intelligent decisions. And decisions that could be more influential. So maybe I feel more empowered, but I almost feel like empowered is a very strong word. I don't want it to come across as though I'm an activist, because I'm not an activist. I want to be very clear. I'm an advocate. I care about parents having the knowledge and information, tools and resources at their disposal to be able to work in partnership and in harmony with their local schools, and to be able to give their children an opportunity to succeed in their local school environment, in particular, their local public school environment, because that's what I'm most versed in. But that's really, and I think that comes with just experience and taking on the onus to do some of my own research on the side and then kind of connecting the dots. But to be honest, most of my knowledge and awareness and understanding has come from attending school board meetings. I got an education just from attending school board meetings. And the beauty of the internet is that if you can't physically be there to attend a meeting, you can watch it. Many of the boards live stream, or you can watch the replay. And what I love most of all is being able to watch other districts' meetings, because I started to pick up on lines that were parroted from district to district. This is something that I was clued into during the pandemic policies and mandates and so forth. As I was attending IUSD board meetings, I was hearing from other parents whose kids went to Capo or to Tustin or Santa Ana. And I was like, wait a second, that sounds like some line that was said at our meetings. So I started tuning into the other board meetings, and it's fascinating and then you kind of put the pieces together and recognize, oh yeah, there's this hierarchy of messaging. And a lot of it comes from the California School Board Association. A lot of it comes from the teachers union. A lot of it comes down from the state too. So yeah, so even if you can't volunteer and if you have just a little bit of free time, tune in to the board meetings, because you will really learn a lot. That's how I got my education on how school funding works. I was completely oblivious to that before, and it's pretty complex, but you learn a lot. They usually break it down pretty well in the school board meetings. So I would say that's a great starting point.
Yeah, I think that's very wise advice for anyone watching right now. So what do you hope to accomplish moving forward from here? Do you have, stay on that school site council? Do you have other aspirations for yourself, or within or outside of your daughter's school?
Thank you for asking that question. Well, first and foremost, I want to make sure my daughter is well equipped and has everything she needs to be successful in her academic and life journey. So that's priority number one for me, is making sure she's well set and grounding her in good values, grounding her in, I am a Christian, and so I like to share with her about the Bible's teachings, about Jesus, about God, because I think it's very important for her to know and understand what the Bible tells us. And I want her to be rooted in virtues and values, but I want her to be self-sufficient and independent. So it's that balance there, right? Just the right amount of nurturing, but then the ability to launch her and let her have her own self-discovery and learn along the way. And then as far as my personal ambitions, it's just such a blessing to be able to serve the community in this capacity and to be welcomed onto campus. So I last year was asked to actually join our IIA board, and I was very interested in joining the board, and my aspirations are still there. Unfortunately, I couldn't join last summer as I had hoped because I was still fulfilling my treasurer responsibilities, and we didn't know this at the time when I was being recruited to join the board, that it presented a conflict of interest. And I thought, well, maybe we could find somebody that would fill that treasurer role. Believe it or not, that's really hard to do. Nobody wants to work with other people's money for some reason. There's a lot of pressure associated with that. So we couldn't find a replacement. So I wasn't able to join the board. But I am hopeful that someone will step forward now and be able to take over the treasurer role. I will have fulfilled my terms, and I do have ambition of hopefully serving on our charter school board. As far as aspirations beyond that, whatever I can do to help support our local leaders that are truly invested in raising the bar for student achievement and reverting back to basic education. I love supporting the classical education model. I'm a big fan of Hillsdale, of the classical academies. I think it's so refreshing to see those springing up, and I'm hearing there's more growth on the horizon there. So just giving back wherever there's a need to be filled is where I want to step in. I have no aspirations of running for office or getting into politics beyond helping out in a school board capacity, but probably not like a district school board, just, charter school board, because it takes a lot out of you to run for office. And I have such respect and admiration for the people like you, Madison, who've gone through that process and done it. I mean,
never say
an abundance
never.
of respect, but it is not my aspiration. Just to stay involved at a local level, helping our children on their education journey, and to be a resource. And I love to write. So I would love to pick back up in blogging. I just like to write about what I see and experience. And much of that over the past few years has been in the school environment. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for being on today, and just for your time and dedication to not only your daughter, but other students that are directly affected by all that you've learned and your experiences. So thank you for being on Say What podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I have really appreciated this dialogue and discussion, and I truly appreciate all the great work Protect Our Kids is doing. Thank you.
So thank you so much for watching our Say What podcast here with Protect Our Kids. We have social media with X, Facebook, and Instagram. We also have our website, pok.org. We'd love for you to go check it out. Like Tiffany said, we have such great resources for parents to download, look through, make sure that you are staying informed and staying involved with your own kids, because you are your child's best advocate. So thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you next time.